Welcome back. I'm here today with David Bradford. David is the executive chairman of Hirevue. David, welcome to today's show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
So let's start with first your background, how you got to where you are today. You've done a couple companies along the way, I understand, and you're also a former attorney. And
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of interesting background. I mean, I graduated from law school back in 1977, long time ago, and but my core career was from 77 to 2000 as a lawyer with progressing positions. I started in a small law firm in Hollywood, but then morphed into the computer industry in 1980, which was, looking back, one of the greatest decisions I ever made. I became a regional legal counsel for a company called Prime Computer. And sometime after that, I became Senior Vice President and General Counsel of Novell, which was based in Utah. And at the time, Novell was, there were four of the world's largest software companies: Microsoft, WordPerfect, Lotus, and Novell. And so Novell was a great run. We took it from about 70 million in revenue to over 2 billion and grew it to 7,000 employees. And it was just a wonderful success. So as general counsel of Novell up until 2000. And then I kind of had a change of life. I retired when I turned 50, but then I went into the business world.
so as you started into the business world, I guess you were just in time for the downturn of the dot-bomb.
Yes, good call. You know, one quick story on that. It's interesting to know, we talk about the internet blow-up that happened in early 2000. What really happened, in my estimation, was everybody prepared for Y2K. So all the software companies, from Novell to WordPerfect to, Microsoft, et cetera, they were having banner years in 1999 because everyone was upgrading their software. So software sales were skyrocketing toward the end of 99. Well, in 2000, then everything started to level off. And our $430 million quarter that happened at the end of 99 turned into a $350 million quarter in early 2000. And so it was the software companies that really began to take a dive. And as they began to take a dive, then everybody started to question the internet companies that were being invested in. And I think that's what drove, and burst the bubble.
So when you ventured out, what are some of the companies you started into?
Right. Well, I started a company called Linking Universe in kind of mid-2000s, which was a website that was connecting business professionals, very much like LinkedIn, right? Linking Universe, LinkedIn, et cetera. We decided to take our platform to Facebook. And so we were the first robust business application on Facebook. And we did that for about a year and a half. Facebook kept changing its APIs, driving us crazy. We couldn't get that established the way we wanted to, but along came Fusion.io. And so I became CEO of Fusion.io and had a great 3-year run with that company, and then retired again, and then took it up again with Hirevue.
Moving in, Hirevue, you're currently chairman.
Yes.
Okay, what is the mission statement of Hirevue?
Well, we're the world's most robust digital interviewing platform. People think of Skype and ability to, interview people over Skype. But Hirevue takes it to a whole different place. It's a whole interviewing platform which allows you to rate the candidates that come in, record their interviews, share those interviews with other people, and then it's a really secure platform, right? It's all in the cloud. People pay an annual subscription fee to license Hirevue and to be able to host video interviews over Hirevue's platform.
So it's a new age of technology then.
Right. I joined them in late 2011 when there was a convergence of market trends, right? Including things like video cameras became ubiquitous in every device, right? And then you had the internet, broadband being, and Wi-Fi being much more robust, et cetera. And so when you have these converging factors, Hirevue was the right place, the right time.
Now, when you're looking at Hirevue, I guess, where are you at today? Is it, do you measure it by the number of, users coming in, or?
Well, we like to measure by number of users using the system. So we have, probably 500 to 700 corporate users, right? And you would see their names like Nike, Starbucks, JP Morgan Chase, et cetera. But the job candidate would never see the Hirevue name. There would be a branded page that you would go to on the career site for JP Morgan Chase and click to take a video interview. Hirevue would be the underlying platform powering all of that.
Got it. So basically providing structure for their interview process.
Right.
Okay.
We talk to the Vice President of Talent Acquisition or the CHRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer, and they bring us in and utilize our platform to vet job candidates.
I love fishing, with my family.
I think it would be easier to use a net.
It was so much fun.
The times when we are together, it makes it all the more worth it.
Having Dad teach them how to cast a fly rod, and
as long as we're doing stuff together, we're having fun.
Some people see a father and a son fishing together, while others see a succession plan.
I'm visiting today with David Bradford, and David, before the break, we're talking about, Chariman of Hirevue. Basically, you're providing a platform and infrastructure for companies to recruit candidates for, and people are, I guess they brand their own corporate name on it.
Right.
You've been around, seeing companies scale to tremendous events, starting back with Novell as the social experiment, going from what was it, 70 million to
$2 billion.
$2 billion
in sales, right?
How do you get teams? When you're looking at organizations that are just growing, how do you get teams to work together, maintaining structure?
Well, let me just say, starting from the get-go, that people mean everything to any organization, right? It's people with passion. When I talk about 4 principles to building $1 billion company, I always start with the people, passionate people in an organization. And so you got to get them focused, get them, the wood behind the arrow, so to speak, and really drive forward as a team. But it's the company culture that you build around it, right? And the belief system that you engender in these individuals that kind of makes it happen. So when they come into work, they're, excited to be there. When they go home at night, they're still excited about the company. When they wake up in the morning, that's what they're thinking about. And so you're looking for can-do people, people that have a positive, mental attitude that can get things done. And so when I hire people, I hire really for attitude. Skills you can teach, attitude is more difficult, right? If you get the right people with the right attitude, you can build a great team.
In a business leadership position, how do you come to make those tough decisions?
It's interesting. I have a philosophy around that, which is it's better to make a good decision today than an excellent decision 6 months from now, right? What I have seen in startups in particular is the CEO or the founder of the company will be so tied up with doing the quote unquote right thing in terms of making the right strategic decision, that it becomes disabling to the organization. You've got to make decisions now. One thing I like about Scott McNeely, I was thinking about him. He's become a friend over the years, but McNeely is a decisive guy. Make no mistake about it, And so I've seen CEOs that have great decision-making skills, and those are the ones I love to emulate.
How do you decide on which projects are worth your time?
I love to look at convergence of market trends and so forth. What's happening in the broader marketplace? And is there a pain point that someone is experiencing out there that someone will actually write a check for? Some years ago, I was in a seniors track meet. I was running the long jump and I stepped on the board, full speed. I was going to long jump 20 feet at my age of 51. My hamstring snapped. And as I landed in that pit, I screamed out in pain. I was just miserable. I would have paid $1 million right then and there to any physician that could have solved that pain. And so I look around for companies that have an ability with a product or service that solves a critical pain point in a corporate process.
I'm visiting here today with David Bradford. He's executive chairman of Hirevue. David, I understand that recently you're going to be releasing a book in the near future.
Yes,
and
I'm very excited
What
about
is that? What is that about?
Well, the book is entitled Up Your Game, 6 Timeless Principles for Networking Your Way to the Top. And so, to me, what matters most is individual relationships. We formed a bit of a relationship here today. Before we even got started, we talked about mutual connections, people that we knew, etc. There was a foundation of trust that formed, right? And as a result, the discussion flows a lot better. Trust, when everything accelerates when trust exists. And so, yeah, I'm a big believer in forming trust and so forth. So the book emphasizes these 6 principles. They're called my UP principles.
He's the world's most trustworthy man. Tax filing deadlines are scheduled around his vacation calendar. The IRS agent who audited his client apologized.
I don't always advise people on their taxes, but when I do, I save them every penny legally possible.
GROCO CPAs and Advisors.
Come to GROCO and stay wealthy, my friend.
Welcome back. I'm here today with David Bradford, and we're talking about his new book now, Up Your Game, the 6 Timeless Principles for Networking Your Way to the Top.
Yeah.
Now, the book is scheduled to be released within this next month.
Well, it's May 14th, 2014. I thought that was a good date, 5/14/14.
And what inspired you to write this book, first of all?
Gosh, you know, I grew up in a little town in Montana at 7,000 feet in altitude. The town had 2,000 people. It still has 2,000 people today, 40 years later. And I came out of law school probably the least connected guy in the universe. I did really well in law school, but when I was finishing law school, I did not have a job. I had 3 kids, family to support, etc., and I was frustrated. And I remember talking to my mom, and Mom said, "David, don't you remember, I've always told you, it's not what you know, it's who you know." And so I'd learned a lot of knowledge in law school, but I was not connected. I did not know one lawyer in the world. And so when it went out to get a job, all of my friends, even though they were not necessarily doing well in law school, those were the guys that had the job. It was the brother-in-law, it was the cousin, it was the classmate from law school that had secured a law job, etc. It was relationships that mattered in getting those jobs. And so I determined kind of early on in my career, when I was faced without a job, graduating from law school, that I would connect and form deep and lasting relationships.
Is it possible for the ordinary person to get those relationships that can get them to the next level?
Well, if I can do it, anybody can, because, I was completely disconnected from the rest of the world. And when people say, well, I'm not a natural networker, I'm a computer programmer, I'm an accountant, it's not my thing to go out there and connect with people. I say networking is very simple, and it starts with this. It's simply being curious. If you are curious and ask a few questions, you will connect with people. People love to talk about themselves. Where are you from? Tell me about yourself. Tell me about the biggest challenge you've ever had in your business career, etc. You start asking those questions, and you elicit responses, and then you form areas of commonality with the individual with whom you're discussing it. And that forms the relationship.
It's interesting you're using the number 6 in there, and it reminds me of the 6 degrees of separation. Or
right.
There's also something on Kevin Bacon. Who knows Kevin Bacon?
Right, 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon.
It's when we're talking about these 6 principles, what do you consider the first principle a person needs to know?
Well, the first one is to start up by giving it up, if you will. The first thing that you want to do when you go to a business conference, when you go to work in the morning, etc., is how can I help the others around me succeed in what they're doing with their lives, right? What is the problem that they're facing that I might be able to help them with? If your first thought is to give with no thought of getting, you're going to benefit. There's a law of reciprocity in the universe. When you give to somebody, there is an innate feeling on the other side that somehow, someday, some way they're going to want to give back. Quick story. In 2005, I was approached by a guy that wanted to be introduced to venture capitalists in the state of Utah. So I took a day out of my life to introduce him around the state. 3 years later, he called me up and he says, I found a great company, Fusion.io. He introduced me. I became chairman of the Strategic Advisory Board and then CEO of the company. So, but for that little nice act that I performed of introducing this guy to VCs around, I would have never known about Fusion.io.
The second principle
is to show up in life. 90% of success in life is just showing up. You got to be there, you got to stand up. And in today's world of social media, you have another ability to stand up and be seen, right? To comment, to be a leader online, whatever your domain expertise is. Join groups, but not just join groups, but then comment and be seen as a domain expert in your area. So show up in person, show up online.
We go to the third.
The third principle is to follow up, right? And so when I meet people, I say within 24 hours, you follow up. You connect with them on LinkedIn, because after 72 hours, people will forget who you are and what the connections were and what you talked about. But if you connect back in with them within 24 hours, you will form a relationship and so forth. So follow up to me is a really lost art today.
Wait, so when you're outlining this about the, first looking at your network and getting started, and then you you basically are showing up and then following up.
Right.
How does a person change their mindset? In other words, you take that programmer says, "Well, this is who I am."
Right.
Right. And now you want me to go and give.
Right.
I don't know how to do that. Is this something that can be learned?
Well, I'm telling you, like I said, if you can ask questions, you can succeed in the world of networking. I might add that networking or network is not a four-letter word. The word work is contained right in the word networking, right? It takes time. It takes commitment every day. So I spend probably an hour every day on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Google Circles, etc., building, and making comments, posting things to my network. And gradually, one at a time, one contact at a time, one card at a time, you can build and grow that network.
Let's go to the fourth principle.
Okay. Fourth principle is to link up. And I love to talk about linking up because when you link up, do it in a personal way. So often you will meet somebody at a business conference and, a week later you'll get a little LinkedIn request that says, hey, please connect with me on LinkedIn, using their, tried and true connection language. But if you come back and you say, hey, I was the guy wearing the yellow shirt in the third row of that conference you were at, we talked about such and such or so and so, then that connection becomes meaningful. And so you link up personally. And then when you link up with people, categorization becomes ultimately important. So for example, because you have an accounting background, when I go back and we connect, I will put you into my accounting or my finance category, right? You have a brother that you mentioned who's a web expert, right? He would go in my techie category. So I have about 60 categories that I've developed over time in my email. And people don't know this, but you can actually categorize in Facebook.
Really?
So, yep.
We got to learn more about this.
Yeah.
With current laws, we have left our children an enormous financial burden. Even though they may be too young to understand it. At GrowCo, we care about you and the ones you love, and the quality of your and their lives. Call us today to see how we can help. 877-CPA-2006.
Helping you along the way.
Welcome back. I'm visiting here today with David Bradford. We're talking about his book, Up Your Game, the 6 Timeless Principles for Networking Your Way to the Top. And we left off, I want to find out that 5th principle.
Okay. Principle number 5 is to stand up. So, we start up, we show up, we follow up, we link up, and then we stand up. And the stand-up principle is one about credibility. People are only going to want to do business with you if they can trust you, if you're credible, if you're a stand-up person, right? If you've done anything in your life or your career that causes a tarnish to be on your name, people are going to question whether or not they want to work with you. So standing up and being a stand-up person is principle number 5.
And I think that's important. If something doesn't go right, putting your feet firm in place and standing up for the right reasons.
Right, absolutely.
Doing the right things.
Yeah.
Sixth principle is what?
Is to finally scale up, right? So that's the last principle, building up your network. You've got it started, et cetera, et cetera. But scale up takes hard work. It takes time. It takes commitment. I mentioned earlier, I set aside every day to do some level of networking, right? And to nurture that network. So as you scale it up to, I've got over 12,000 LinkedIn connections. I'm maxed out at 5,000 Facebook friends, et cetera. But it's just one contact at a time. I'll tell you one quick story that I love that illustrates this point about scaling up a network. Some years ago, the story is told of a pilot woman that crash landed in the Arctic Circle. And she was, there. She wasn't injured, fortunately, but it was 600 miles to the nearest outpost. Fortunately, she had some food and a backpack and an ability to walk. And so she began to walk 600 miles across that frozen tundra. And she saved herself and got to this small outpost. They hospitalized her. And reporters came around the world and they said, how in the world did you save your life by walking 600 miles across that frozen tundra? And she says, the answer is this. I didn't walk 600 miles. I walked 1 mile 600 times. The same principle is true in building a network. It's done one card at a time, one contact at a time, etc. And so at the end of the day, it does take some hard work to nurture that network.
When everything is said and done, how will you define success in your life?
Well, first and foremost, it has to be around my family. I'm blessed with 16 grandchildren, 4 great kids, their spouses. And, the treasure of my life is my wife, Linda Bradford, Dr. Linda Bradford. She has a PhD in instructional technology, and she's brilliant. And she's built her own website called The View, Virtual Immersive Educational World, taking education into the 21st century. And so the relationships with family has to be number one. But then, the personal relationships that you've developed over time. And the deeper those relationships are, the happier person that you are.
It seems so key that happiness comes through your relationships with people in life.
Right.
Now, David, one last question. What are some of your role models in life?
Oh, gosh. When I look back at the CEOs that I've worked for, Eric Schmidt has got to be at the top. Eric was our boss at Novell from 1996 to 2000. So I worked directly for Eric, and he's been a dear friend, and he's, stayed in touch over the last 14 years since we both left Novell. And he was brilliant at, execution, right? Every CEO I've discovered has a skill set. Bill Gates, I battled him for years, Novell versus Microsoft. The thing I always respected about Bill and why he's a role model for me is his ability to hire smart people. I never interacted with anyone at Microsoft that I thought, oh, that guy doesn't know what's going on. He hired smart people. So I look at these CEOs and what they've done. Ray Norda was the master of the distribution, right? So from 1985 to 1995, he built this juggernaut, this reseller channel. So he really knew marketing and how to leverage channels and so forth. He was a competitor too. At his core, he didn't like to lose at anything. So those are 3 folks that I would cite as great role models for me.
David, thank you for being on today's show.
Okay.
I've been visiting here today with David Bradford, currently the chairman of Hirevue and also the author of the book Up Your Game, The 6 Timeless Principles for Networking Your Way to the Top. Join us again next week right here on American Dreams.
Thank you.